need one more member of the finance committee. And I know that, so when we swear in the two new council members, then we will have not two.
What about double?
That,
Double check.
no, they're going to make that appointment. It's early, right? So they're gonna, that's Sunday.
Oh, I see.
So it'll be read that do one thing Sunday first, all be together. So we're gonna have 9.
But to your point, is that when they're sworn in, they
Pick which committee.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Brent is CPA. Oh my gosh, how great would it be to have, you know, him on the finance committee?
Thank you. I'll get on with it. So that.
No, no, you don't. No. We need, oh,
And
yeah.
whoever the new chair is will probably.
Oh, that's true.
But, okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, are we live streaming and unmuted? It is 5:04 and I am going to call the meeting to order. And Ms. Clay, if you would be so kind as to call the roll.
Mr. Hannah,
Here.
Commissioner Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Mitchell,
Here. Well, I guess all 3 of the current members are here. So we have a quorum. And item 3 is the approval of the agenda. Get a motion.
I move approval of the.
Second. Second, by Mr. Hannah, without objection, show the agenda approved. Ms. Clay, item 4 is general public comment. Do we have a member of the public who would like to speak?
yes, we have general public comment from Ms. Emily Fritz.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, Ms. Fritz.
Good afternoon. How are y'all?
Well, thank you for being here.
All right, thank you. My first comment is about the document that you have here that has the projected millage rates. Every one of these projections is in fact a tax increase, even the one that's the current rate. So I recommend that prior to that, for the June 20th meeting of the full council, that y'all include the rollback rate in this. That gives the council more options and gives them the option of not raising taxes. Whether or not they exercise it, I don't know, but it'll at least give them an alternative to it. And when I spoke to this exact meeting 3 years ago, I talked about the high cost of gas and groceries due to high inflation. And I honestly didn't think I would be standing here 3 years later and tell you that it's gotten worse. But you know it has. It has gotten much worse. People are struggling. I don't have to tell you this. Salaries have gone up a little bit, but not comparable to what inflation has gone up. And for retired people like me, my salary hasn't gone up. So people are really struggling. Another thing I didn't think I would be saying at this meeting was that Leon County just had its worst storm in 40 years that disproportionately affected moderate and low income neighborhoods. And there are people in those neighborhoods whose homes have suffered severe damage. I know a couple of people who've had to move out of their homes. Some people don't even know if they can move back into their homes because their insurance has a high deductible and they're not sure if they can pay it. So there are people who are struggling to stay in their homes because of the storm. High inflation, a storm that has caused monumental damage to Leon County. The last thing these people need is a tax increase. They are struggling. They are more worried about keeping their homes than frankly what you guys are doing, with all due respect. And I don't mean to be critical, but with all due respect, most of the public has not sensed a lot of accomplishments or a lot of results with this organization. Yes, you've done a lot of things, but they haven't seen a lot of outcome improvements. So my recommendation is to hold the line on taxes. People just cannot handle it. Please don't tax these people out of their homes. Some of them are already out of their homes, so please don't tax them so much they can't get back into their homes. And again, for the June 20th meeting, I recommend that you have the rollback rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There's no more public comment.
Uh, Okay, item 5 is the trend chart that Ms. Fritz was referring to. Know that it is online, so if anybody is watching this, if they go to the website, this chart, again, Ms. Fritz was referring to, is on there. And Ms. Fritz, we will provide for the full board meeting, the rollback rate, what it would be. Very much like what we did last year.
Thank you.
Dina, if we could make sure that that's on the chart. And little recognition here, Dina, thank you for running these numbers for us and giving us so many choices, including one that, you know, we've never considered, which was the 0.4375. So this is good choices for the council to review. Ms. Fritz's suggestion, adding the rollback rate is just one more option. From just a plain basic math standpoint, and Dina, please let me know if I'm missing the mark here. Essentially, the property appraiser has given us their first estimation of what the total value would be, which is in round numbers, $25.5 billion. A lot of money. And it reflects the fact that there are additional properties that have been added, new builds to the tax rolls, along with housing sales that were valued because of Save Our Homes at, we'll say, 300,000. Somebody sells a house that's really valued at 800,000, and that goes on the tax rolls as an $800,000 home. So we are going to generate additional revenues as long as we, remain the same or a rollback rate. Just like last year, we'll end up bringing in more money. So that's what this reflects, and that reflects the property appraiser's first attempt at guessing what the total value will be. If you look around the state, in the south, southeast, and southwest, they tend to be off by large amounts because property values are soaring. Leon is fortunate at least in commenting on this before the meeting got rolling with Mr. Grayson and Ms. Snyder. Leon has we have this sort of slow and steady growth. There has been a higher than usual jump, and that was really reflected from 2023 to 2024. Anecdotally, I would speak to it as it's probably not going to be the same jump for this year, but it will be an increase. So again, you simply do, you multiply the 25.5 billion by any of these numbers, and you'll get the projected revenues. And if you just kind of follow along, the real number to look at is the projected annual increase. Again, Ms. Fritz will have the number that will have 0 as the projected increase, like we did last year. But if you look at, if we just left it exactly what we were doing this year for next year, based on the property appraiser's projections, we would generate another $785,000. I will point out that the guy is always looking at these numbers, and sometimes I almost look at it too much that they get a little fuzzy. But then I put them aside and I come back to them a little later, and I will say this. Despite the comment that was made that the public doesn't see results, and I'm not disagreeing with Ms. Fritz. We have a job to do to better articulate to the public what we are doing and the results. And the results are just now beginning to be seen. So hopefully, through some sort of quality analysis, we got something to report to the public. But what I will say is that we have tapped the brakes frequently on spending because we weren't quite ready. But as we've now grown and we are, sort of in year 3, going in year 4, I think that the council has a little more confidence in what we're doing and also has a good idea of how much we are spending. The amount of money that we have in the account versus the amount that has been encumbered. If you look at the account, you're like, oh my God, they've got so much money. A lot of that money has been encumbered. So I want to be, I'm sort of sharing this with my 2 fellow council members, but really to anybody who's looking at this live or coming back and looking at this after the fact, that we as a council are going to have some tough decisions to make, and that is to not spend or see the results of some good programs and continue to spend on those. Again, it's important, and Sika, I know you know this, and I should establish to Ms. Fritz's comments. It's important that we, regardless of whether we ask for $1 or $100 from a taxpayer, that we do a good job of showing them what that $1 or $100 brought to them. So the rest in terms of the review of this millage rate, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but it's pretty straightforward. Or Ms. Snyder could answer the questions. One final thing I want to point out is that remember, when we reserve money, it's based on that which we project to bring in. So it's that the reserves go up a little if you don't roll it back. The reserves will go up a little, not dramatically, but there is a slight increase. Questions?
Yeah, I do. We are right now at 0.3477, right? And we're-
Yes.
So I was looking at the projection for 2025. Why are the future years almost 50% less than the projected annual increases?
Those were, and so I'm gonna jump in. So Holly actually does this valuation for us. And there was a point when, if I'm not mistaken, we are lowering, so we estimate about a 4%. The county estimate, the property appraisers estimated about a 9.25% increase. We usually try to estimate around a 4%. And so as the years go out, we're reducing that a little bit. And so you're gonna see the numbers kind of go down because we're trying to project not to have this huge
Trying
fund
to be
balance.
conservative.
Trying to be very conservative.
estimate.
Yeah.
And then the 0.375 is where we were before we rolled it back last year, right?
Yes, 0.375 is where we were for fiscal year 22. 23, we rolled it back.
And
No, I'm sorry, 22 and 23, we kept it the
for
same.
the first 2 years, it's 0.375.
0.375. For 23, 24, we rolled back to 0.3477.
Okay.
And while it's not on here, and we will put the rollback on here for June, we did compute it and it's like 0.314, something like that. It's like a 0.314. But we'll add it to this and that gives us the exact same revenue.
And so all of these projections is just basically looking at income. It's not doing any comparison or projection about what the CSC's budget is as far as expenditures on various programs and whatever.
Right, this is only doing that year to year revenue. That's all this is doing.
We're going to, we're gonna, prior to, the full council meeting again, when we got, the two new members, we're gonna spend a little bit of extra time. Normally, I'm like, oh, budget's good, yeah, all spending is, I've looked at everything, everything's good. In this case, we're gonna spend a little more time on it, just for the, I hope, to the value of everybody, including the two members. And I'm gonna let, Ms. Green meet with them individually with hopes that from a programmatic standpoint, she could show that here's how we're spending money in these categories. Here's sort of the way the council looks at spending categories. But it may be a little bit boring, but I feel like it's worth going through with everyone, especially the two new council members. How we're funded and really how much money we can anticipate. You know, with Ms. Marsteller joining the board, she's run 3 state agencies. So excited. Like that's her. Well, I shouldn't say that. I you know, sometimes agency heads don't do the budget, but I think she understands budgeting. And certainly Mr. Johnson is a CPA, understands the numbers. And I don't know, you know, I don't know what their personal take is going to be on our budget, but I do know this, that they'll be able to look at this pretty quickly and understand, you know, what we're up against. I will say this, Commissioner, and you raised a really good point. All we're looking at is how much are we gonna bring in? This year, we made some decisions as a council to spend additional dollars that we hadn't talked about at the beginning of last year. And, you know, and I remember Dr. Glenn looking at me and she said, hey, you said we had more money, and I said, we do. We have additional dollars we can spend, but when you make a decision to spend money in summertime, it means not spending money on other priorities if they should come up. Well, we were lucky. We've always had a little bit of a padding, so we've been able to do that. Again, from a programmatic standpoint, we haven't talked, this is just the raw dollars. We're not. But I think as a board, as a council, we do need to talk about programmatic stuff. And I think Ms. Green will be able to articulate that a little easier. And it's like, once you decide what you want to spend, then this becomes easy.
But we have our first trim meeting next week, right? No,
No,
it's not June 20th. Not June meeting at budget discussion or something.
you'll have a little bit of a budget discussion on June 20th, not anything.
It's just our regular
Just
meeting.
kind of talking
Oh, okay.
about, yeah.
So
trying-
that's not our actual.
Right.
Right.
But at the next budget and finance committee, so after you all talk a little bit about how you want us, which rates you want us to look at, then at the next budget and finance meeting, which will be July 8th. So it's not the 1st because we moved it to
Right.
July 8th. We will bring you a tentative budget with some programming that would be continuation programming. And it would also show you what money would be available for any new programming, keeping in mind where you all want to be as far as your priorities. And so we will remind you of that as well.
And then the full board, okay, again, the trim notice goes out and the hearings are in September, but when does the trim notice have to go out? When do we have to tell the property appraiser what we are going to consider at 2 public hearings?
After the July meeting.
Right, so
So the July meeting's on
That's-
the 18th.
that's
the
when we,
19th. I have to report to them what your
So to
choice is.
anybody listening, this is important.
That
not-
is the meeting you
Not
come
to
to.
say that the public hearings in August, we're not taking in what we hear and could make a decision different. But it would be very, very helpful that if anyone had an opinion on the millage rate, that they speak in the month of July, at our July meeting. Therefore, when we let the property appraiser know what our first vote is, he will put it out to the world, and they can come and comment on it in the 2 meetings in August. Again, September. If we choose to change it, a new notice has to go out, and that becomes problematic. It's not that it can't be done, but it's really important. I don't care which side of the issue you're on. Roll it back, leave it the same, raise more, that you come to the July meeting.
Which actually rolls into your trim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It rolls into your trim timeline if you want to go to that.
Yes.
Next, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And that is the hearing schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we sit on June 10th, we're meeting. June 20th is the governing council meeting where we're going to try to give a crash course in the budget, an overview of where we are financially. Ms. Green can speak to sort of programmatically what we've talked about wanting to spend, emphasis on early childhood, things of that nature, and projections as to what that might cost. And we'll hint at the fact that at the next meeting, they're going to need to have their mind at least open and ready to be made up for their initial vote on a millage rate. And in the past, you guys will remember that we have, as a budget and finance committee, we had not recommended a rate. I think one time we recommended to leave it the same, but we came to the board and had the discussion and said, here's how, we sort of see this, and allowed the council not to be guided by a recommendation that, 3 or 4 of us made, but rather collectively. And they will have had a couple of meetings leading up to it that their mind will begin to be shaped, I think. So that will be the June meeting. Then the July meeting will have our next meeting, and then leading up to the July 18th meeting, where we will take our initial vote. That Ms. Green will then send that number to the property appraiser. It will generate a number that will go out to all taxpayers, basically saying, if none of these taxing authorities change their mind, this is what you can expect your tax bill to be, the truth and millage notice. That then prompts public comment on what they've received in the mail. Again, they're entitled to change. They're entitled to show up and try to change the will of any of the taxing authorities. But I would encourage them to do it earlier rather than later.
Mr. Chair, may I just add a caveat to that as well? So in addition to what you're saying, after that tax notice goes out, to your point, they could come to that September 12th meeting, which is where the council will adopt the tentative millage and the tentative budget. If for some reason you all change, then we have to start the process all over again.
Right.
And we will have to pay, we as in the council will have to pay to have those notices sent back out to Leon County property owners. We did an estimate last year and it falls somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 depending. So I think that's just important to note so that we have as much conversation from the public at that July meeting. Because really by the 12th, it's hard to undo what's already been done without using taxpayer money to really, that's a program.
Right. Again, it's not that it's impossible.
Right, it's not impossible.
But that's why I say, if anybody is listening, anybody you talk to, the best time to show up is at our July meeting. And then you just kind of go through, to Ms. Green's, point, we will have, the official, adoption of those hearings on the 12th and the 26th of September, which are not in competition, but after the county and the school board, vote on theirs. And I know you get a lot of fun twice. And then the final adoption will be September 26th, and that is the adoption of both the millage rate and our annual budget for next year.
So just from
Yeah,
to clarify, on July the 8th, Ms. Green, you're gonna lay out where we're extended right now financially, and then what dollars potentially are left moving forward. Like, we've cut purchase orders for these programs and obligated X amount of money.
Right.
And can we do it by category, or not even by?
We could do it by program, we could
By
do it by
program.
category, that is
Yeah,
part of
by
what
program.
Mr. Mitchell works with our finance team
Right.
on that, at least every other month to update that spending plan. So when we come in on July
July 8th,
8th,
you'll say,
we'll try to have a good estimation of what rollover is going to be, and rollover would be any money that's not encumbered. So it's not earmarked to a program, it's not.
but just to be clear, the $2.2 million, I think, that we put towards some of the early learning, the OBGYN, that money is considered encumbered, right?
Yes,
For the next two years,
Yes.
2.5 years, or whatever that
Yes.
was.
so we'll show it, but it will not be in the, what I would call the rollover that is available to put with your revenue for 25. So we will show what that rollover is, so that you get a good idea of what expenses are gonna be, all of that, and how much money is actually gonna be available for any new programming, because keep in mind that if we have done this right, and I believe we have, you will know exactly how much you have to put toward new programs, because
or more towards existing.
or more toward existing programs, because we have encumbered money in the current year instead of trying to, so that's a conversation you and I have had before, instead of encumbering it every year. My philosophy is you encumber it in the first year and then just pull from it, so that what you're looking at in a current year is real money that can be either allocated to current programs that are doing a bang up job, or can be used for new.
See it?
It's, yeah.
As an example, if we raised $8 million or $7.6 million, we may have $7.6 million encumbered, but it's gonna be over the course of the next 2 years plus, which then that means all 100% of the money for the next year should be available for new programs.
Exactly.
Right, and if everything stays the same, if the revenue stays the same, and we do go back to the rollback rate, you would know, okay, we still have 2.6 million, 3 million, whatever the number is.
Got it.
And then if you didn't, then in addition to that, you'd have the 780,000. Whatever these additional assets are, right?
Yes.
And so, for example, I may be taking this too far, but so for example, with the money that was approved for perinatal, the 2.8, as we get into, so that's 2.25 years, we get into the end of that second year, we're going to know how that is working, bring that to you, and you will have time to decide whether you want to take it out even more. If you want to take it out even more, we will project that into that next trim year. If you don't, then that would be more money that's available for something.
It is, there's sort of two ways of budgeting, and I think that the way that Sika's laying it out is, I don't want to say the simplest, because again, it depends on the way you're used to budgeting. It is the easiest to understand if you're just looking at a spreadsheet. It will tell you it looks nice, but don't touch it. It may become available when that funding cycle for that program is up, and we'll know. So if you know, we budgeted 2 million and we only spend 1.8 million over the 2 years, let's just say it's a 2-year contract. That's 200,000 that you're gonna be able to
So
spend.
do you know just, in round numbers, how much right now we have committed for in total? Do we have that?
Yeah,
Like, is it 8 million?
Right now,
Yeah, in total,
for this year,
no, through what is actually encumbered.
right.
It-
The 2.8 plus the blah, 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 plus the
Yes.
blah.
so for this current year, we have encumbered or spent right at 7 million. And the way I did that was when you look at the amended budget that we're gonna bring to the full council, we have all of our programs allotted, including our kindergarten readiness, so our perinatal care coordination, transportation, and family engagement, our SIPs for the rest of the year, technical assistance. So literally for program investments, we projected 7.4 million. We have about 443,000 that is unencumbered
That's it, right?
for this current
For the,
financial year.
so that means that next year, 100% of that money is unencumbered. Right?
The money that we vote on,
Right.
it's
Is unencumbered, because the money that's encumbered right now also is encumbered for next year. It comes out of this year's budget.
And the money that was encumbered last year is sitting there, and the programs that you approved are pulling off that money.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I'm not a accountant, and so because I was listening to what you were saying at the last budget meeting. And so I've tried to make it so that I can explain it, so that I can understand it and then I can explain it. So if you ask me where the money, I can tell you where it is. I realize it may be a little different from what the school system does, or maybe the county does. But this was something that I pulled from Florida Housing, because that's how they would determine what money was left in a project. When it was encumbered, it was held, and then they just pulled off of it. So I
As
know
opposed to saying the 2.8 for 2.2 years, you would say.
Divide it out.
1.3 from this year,
Right.
1.3 this year, and 200 grand for the next.
for me, that leaves too much, for me, that leaves too much room
It's all
for
right.
error. Whereas I can just
Wait.
pull the 2.8 and I know it's there.
And by the way, the budget is run both ways. The way we present it to the council is sort of like your checkbook.
Yeah.
Just, you've written the check for $100, right? It doesn't mean the person you wrote the check to has cashed it yet,
Right.
but you can't spend it.
Exactly.
Because
Right.
if they do cash it, the next one will.
And John and I have this conversation all the
I
time,
know.
accrual versus
Yes, and
cash
And
back.
Dr. Glenn preferred it that way, which is why we presented, well, we really only presented that way. But the numbers, the way Dina runs it both ways, so
Yeah,
if
she
you
runs
prefer
it
the
both
other
ways.
way,
No, it's okay.
we can figure it out.
But I think it's safe to say that basically 100% of the new money we collect next year is free game.
Yes. Well, yes. There is sort of a base budget that will bring the exact number, but that will include rent and salaries and
Yeah.
contract fees,
And-
but right.
Programming,
Other than that, yes, 100%.
programming wise, it's a, and we're even looking at some more efficiencies, operational wise. Is that a word? Operational.
Trying to get operationally, yeah, it's whatever.
I don't live the sentence in a preposition, so that's why. Okay,
Okay,
you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
okay, so that is a review of the chart as well as a review of the timeline. In case people didn't hear, it would be a dream if you have an opinion on the millage rate. Please show up in the month of July at the board meeting on July 18th, right here in River City at 4 o'clock.
Okay,
No, go ahead.
when are we going to begin to look at all those nonprofits that are deducted from the Children's Services Council from the CHSD process? It's on moratorium for 2 years, but
Right.
we already finished 1 year. I mean, when are we going to start looking?
It's before everybody arrived, Mr. Grayson, Ms. Sider, and I were talking about that, and that is, the two authorities act independent of one another. We can only react to what the commissioners decide. Your colleagues, and so if the county commission decides to eliminate, or the CHSP process decides to eliminate $100 in funding for children, then that decision is made. Then if those people who or services that are not provided by those $100, because the $100 went away, have the ability to come to the council. Between that, where we are today, and that point, which is, to your point, a little more than a year away, I believe that the council staff is trying to work with those recipients of CHSP funds to sort of show them the way we do things, so that if they chose to apply for any of our programs, that they would understand the process and qualify it or not. But our criteria is different than CHSP, and it's probably a higher threshold. I think a better way of doing it.
And it's not just the county, the CHSD is like
You're
the
right.
cities and the county.
Right.
And it's just a policy decision that the county will make whether to not fund it, send those people that provide child-related services to the Children's Services Council.
So may I add to that? So as you all know, we meet with the city and the county. I have a copy with them every 2 weeks. So I gave you all the letter that County Administrator Long have presented. And the county has requested we look at a replication, if you will, of CHSP for areas that cover children, youth, and families for fiscal year 27. So that would mean we have the rest of this fiscal year. So that would be fiscal year 25 to talk about it. And if we were to do anything on that, we would need to make that decision by the beginning of fiscal year 25-26. So the beginning of 25-26, because if we were to adopt something that either looks like that, absorb it, whatever it is, you all as a council decide, we would need to open up that application portal in the spring of 26. So it would have to be between January and April of 26 to give time for the applications, time for all of that, so that awards would be made for funding that begins October 1 of 26. So what I have been communicating to the county was, let us get through this trim process, understanding, especially with all the things that have kind of gone on. And then we could open up our council discussions in the fall. So it would be right after October, maybe November, December. And we could have real workshops such that that is the only thing that is discussed. And I think that it will be a robust discussion. While I can't share, because that would be talking for other council members, I can't do that. But what I will say is there's some strong opinions. And so definitely some conversations on that. But that's kind of our timeline, council member Cummings. So it's not just sitting out there like Kevin Hart's and just going to disappear.
Great.
It ain't just disappearing.
I just want to make sure it's on the radar.
Yeah. And to that point, if I may, and then I'll come back. So as we're contemplating what's gonna be available for next year, if you remember in our kindergarten readiness line, there was a homeless line, there was a housing line. And what we had talked about in previous meetings was just providing some funding, some line item funding to help with emergency sheltering for shelters that deal with children, youth, and families. So that would be CCYS from the youth, Family Promise or Hope Community, whichever one you remember that one, from a family perspective. Breon House from pregnant and expecting moms up to a year, and then Refuge House for any parents that have children that are escaping domestic violence. So in my talks with the county, they have looked at a formula with that. We had originally, this was back in 23, had talked about earmarking in this coming fiscal year about 500,000 for emergency sheltering for families with children. I think they're going to come in somewhere between 350 and 450. I will know tomorrow when they post the packet for what the suggestion is and how that breakdown is. But as we're talking about unencumbered money and we think about our kindergarten readiness line, one of those lines was homelessness and how do we keep that stability? So I did want to just mention that because Shane didn't talk all the time. And so we will identify that in the budget for you all to review.
And I think that's great, because by the time we get to 2025, 26 for that consideration, we will have absorbed some of those groups that provide that direct services to our children.
And that would be the only housing, that would be our only contributions to stable housing. And in our estimation, so staff have done a lot of research on this, and there are lots of families that literally are sleeping in cars. They're taking their kids to school, but they're sleeping in cars, they're couch surfing, and in one case, a mom did not want to go to a shelter because they didn't have any funded spaces, and they were gonna have to separate her and put her in Kearney and put the kids like separately in CCYS. And she just wasn't willing to do that. So she literally walked out of the social worker's office. So we don't know. So if we can do that, I think we would be helping to contribute to some stabilization. And so that would be not only for the emergency housing, but it would also pay for some case management for those families.
Do we know how much in total the CHSP process programs that they're talking about turning over, what the total amount of money is?
If you look at what we talked about before, it's about 1.2 million. I think about 400 something of that would come from the county, and the other 1 point something million would be from the city. So it ends up being.
Yes, a significant amount from the city, but in another amount from the county, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's just a really slippery slope, and and things are different now. I think before we were giving rent waivers and all of those things and extending rents and mortgages, and now the bills come due and people don't have the ability to make rent. And we gave rent forgiveness and all those federal programs are gone now. And it's a lot harder. I know there's a lot of stories that break your heart, but I just can't. I can't pay any more motel bills months on end. It's just, and I hate it, but we just don't have the money. It's not taxpayer money. Of course, we can't use that. So this is foundation money that we raised to try to help fill the gaps. But it's
And see, the thing about it is a lot of those nonprofits use that CHSP funding to draw down other federal funds. And in many instances, they draw down more than 50% off of the money that they get from that process.
yeah.
And so it's not just pulling that money away, but it's also adversely affecting their ability to pull down other funds. And I just don't want it to fall through the cracks, because it's gonna have a ripple effect on families and on children, even on workers that work with the nonprofits. They'll have to, if they don't get funding, they will have to not only cut services, but cut employees as well. So I think it's great, and I commend you guys for looking at it early. checking with Shankton as well. But I think by the time the rubber meets the road, we will have something in place so that we can sustain those programs, because I think it's even more dire now, you know, with the storm and what have you. But it just breaks my heart to know that children are living in cars.
Yeah, so at least doing that helps with the hotel bills and that, 'cause that's not what this money.
Right.
Living in cars, you're living.
Yeah, that's not what this money would be
Worse,
doing.
living in dugouts at the park.
One second, Chair. Additionally, if the council approves that, from our perspective, we then have a seat on an advisory board that will work with, and that advisory board would be, consistent of us, the city, the county, UPHS, and, one more, can't remember right now. But we would work with the Big Bang Continuum of Care so that we can try to make sure that, yeah, so we're coordinating services and moving families out of that emergency into a more permanent, yeah. So we're trying to find this overarching way to kind of handle that. So I did want to let you guys know that.
So I, kind of a comment and I'll end it with a question. One, Commissioner, I can say this publicly because you have taken a position publicly. I was very proud of you for standing up for sort of the integrity of two programs. The voters voted for the Children's Services Council, recognizing all of the funding that it existed. And it was, at one point, it seemed like it was going to be sort of a bait and switch, that we were going to be told, here's your new responsibilities, and you're not getting the resources, which is not what the voters asked for. So I was very proud of you for standing up. I mean that, and I can't tell you privately, but I can tell you publicly that and that's leading up to this question. And I'll be interested in hearing what Mr. Rowe has to say. From a legal standpoint, I don't know that the CHSP or the county and the city can give us money to administer programs.
So they cannot.
They're not giving us.
Yeah, so we have no mechanism to accept any other funding but a grant for which we might apply for and get that money.
Right.
But we can't take donations, you can't, right, so there's not really a mechanism for that.
And I asked point blank in the meeting, you all are giving us these programs,
that
what money
legal-
comes with it?
And we asked,
And it was zero.
And by the way, nobody can give us programs. No one can. The only ones who can make the decision to take programs or fund programs are the 10 members of the Children's Services Council. That's why it's like the county has and the city have a difficult decision to make. And I get everybody needs resources. But the voters created a Children's Services Council with very clear language, and it wasn't, take on responsibility that's currently being funded through another mechanism. In fact,
And I agree, and I made the point
You
that
did a
when
great
we
job.
did our needs assessment, it was based on all the services that were being provided by the
Absolutely.
nonprofits.
yeah,
So I sort of felt like it was a bait and switch, but I believe it's a policy decision. I just believe that it's gonna happen.
and in the process to Chair Mitchell's point, we are working with as many nonprofits as we can. And they have said that we are the most stringent, that they have to deal with when it comes to reporting and those kind of things. That being said, though, they are working very hard to do that, and they understand that. So I don't think we get a heck of a lot of pushback, but capacity is an issue because they just have not had to have that strenuency before. And so the capacity and the acumen to understand what we're requiring. We are spending lots of time on that, and that's okay. But it's important for the community to understand how that, and that's one of the things Alice Lee Stansbury was saying. We have to invest in that capacity piece, and 3 years is not a long time. It isn't, and I get it. I get that people want to see the needle move now. But I do know for a fact, and we have done some data that we've given you, that there is some difference that we make. That your focus on kindergarten readiness, this roadmap that we're going to do and work with Dr. Graham and Madeline Core and bring all those funders together so that we're all moving in the same direction, that is going to make a difference. It's going to take time, but it's going to make a difference. Yeah.
One final point that sort of an answer to your question. I don't know all federal grants, so I'm not speaking for all of them, but I am speaking for many. As long as a governmental entity, we qualify as a governmental entity, is funding something, you can draw down federal dollars. The same way we worked with the Early Learning Coalition, because they got funding from a local government, they were able to draw down additional resources 11 months out of the 12 through a Division of Early Learning. So not all grants are going to work that way, but we do qualify as a yes and a funding authority. So as long as not every single one is like that, but there's usually something about a local funding source, and we certainly qualified as that for the Early Learning Coalition. Again, I'm glad these kind of questions and these conversations are coming up so that we don't miss out on whatever we're going to put forward. Again, the county and the city have decisions to make, and then we have a decision to make, whoever that board is at the time, as to how to react to those decisions.
But that gives you just a timeline on, we'll
Okay.
kind of bring this open for discussion, and we'll have representatives from the city and the county for questions that the council may have.
And there is a plan to have these forums of workshops
Oh, yeah,
with the.
yes,
with the-
yes, absolutely.
Right.
Want to make
I
sure.
think we did.
Well, we are going to have quite a meeting, and I would say this, and Ms. Clay, maybe if you share with all of the council members what the next finance meeting is going to be about, and I can certainly say it at the meeting on the 20th, where we encourage people to come, at least listen on July 8th if they're free, and ask questions and participate. As the chair of this committee, I'm saying, if you're a member of the council and you have questions and you have comments, I want to hear them as much as I do the superintendent and commissioners. But I really, to let them know as early as possible that we will be having this meeting, and we encourage them to come. And certainly Mr. Johnson and Ms. Marsteller would be encouraged to come as well.
Additionally, June will be the judge's last meeting.
That's right.
Per administrative order, Judge Barbara Hobbs will be joining us as of July 1. So I'll be getting her oriented as well. So we will have that.
So we do have three.
There's some last night.
Oh, is that it?
I'm sorry.
Oh, Commissioner, I'm sorry. So, okay, so yes, we will have three brand
Can we vote on a new chair on the 20th?
On the 20th, yes, on June 20th.
but we have a vice chairman. Yeah, doesn't the vice chair just fit to chair?
So on June 20th,
No.
okay.
Our
well,
bylaws,
chair.
we vote for the chair.
Okay.
But the vice chair
He will
serves as
serve.
chair.
He will serve. If he happens to be the one that's elected, then he'll just take over. If it happens to be another council member, once that vote happens, switch. And that council.
Okay,
On the agenda, let me ask, you, on the agenda, will that occur at the beginning of the meeting? Okay, awesome.
First thing after, quorum is established.
Awesome.
so the next meeting date for this group is July 8th, where we have our agenda pretty much set. It's going to look a lot like today's, but we will add the rollback rate. So we'll have a little more numbers. We will have some more data from Ms. Green in terms of program spending. And we will have that conversation and we'll be able to sort of reflect to the full board, those who aren't able to make it to that July 8th finance meeting. Everyone is welcome to come. And the public is welcome to come. If for some reason the July 20th, so what is the board meeting that
Board meeting is July 18th.
July 18th, and July 18th doesn't work for folks. July 8th is also a good time for folks to show up and opine. And also get to hear sort of what we're talking about. Ms. Fritz, I applaud you for being here, and for
was proud.
well, maybe July 8th will, and if not, July 18th, maybe will. So that's what will be on the agenda. Committee member comments.
Oh, 1 second, I need to have a quick discussion on Fair Labor Standards.
Oh, I jumped right over.
Okay. Quick discussion, so we were notified that the Fair Labor Standards has moved so they've moved the needle again. I think so I have been trying, and so Chair, I may need your help with this. I have been trying to find with the state of Florida how they handle the Fair Labor Standards, because I will tell you, I was a little panicked when I saw the thresholds. So for our team, and I'll hand you guys these, because I started doing an analysis and then I stopped, because I started getting a little frustrated. And frustrated isn't even the right word. I think the numbers started moving together. So currently, if you look at the top, this is where we are currently. Come July 1, there is a threshold that has to hit, and we are still okay with that threshold, with our position. I am exempt. Now, what I saw with the state of Florida is all SMS team members, all SMS employees with the state of Florida are exempt.
Oh, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
All SMS, and this is, okay, let me stop because I'm talking all over the place. So I was able to find a classification and compensation program manual from DMS that was revised May 1st, 2023. Because I was looking for how the state handles the Fair Labor Standards Act. And so when I went through, I am fairly confident that my position is the equivalent of an SMS and therefore exempt, period. Don't have to worry about it. With our other positions, I don't have that same confidence. And so I am wondering if there is someone with whom I can speak to see where we will land with the rest of our team members. That's number one.
Our general counsel.
Yes, well,
The
yeah.
general counsel just gave the
I-
opinion.
yeah.
Did you tell? Okay.
yeah, I'll get you.
Yeah, general counsel can't tell us like who would classify and who wouldn't.
Oh.
And so there are a couple of considerations, even with, so we would make decisions whether to make an overtime pool for those who don't qualify. And if we choose to raise, then we gotta do compression. Put a pin in that. The other concern is our providers, because this will apply to them as well. And so depending, we could see increases in overtime pots for some of our provider positions, depending on how those positions are classified within those providers.
Will you define provider position?
Yes, the program people, the program organizations, the nonprofits with whom we contract. Yeah, they are subject to fair labor. And so, for example, the minimum for exempt used to be, or currently it's like 30. Where's my memo? Here.
35, 5, 6.
Yes, 35. On July 1st, it goes up to 43,888. So if you aren't making 43,888, you are eligible for overtime. Depending,
But you can say to the providers, basically, don't let somebody work overtime and you need to work within the budget that you established. Now, when they come back for funding again, they can come in, but
well, it won't affect what we're doing, right? Cause those contracts are those contracts. Now, we do, for any contract that is a year or that is over a year. At about 9 months, we go in and ask, or we look at their financials to see where they are with their financials. If they haven't drawn all their money down, then we're pretty much okay. But if it turns out they have some changes, then we might have to look at a budget. I'm just concerned, and I just wanted to bring this to this committee for you to contemplate, is that if we have any of our providers with whom we contract, and they have staff that is subject to this, that literally work with our team members. So for example, when I was at CHS, we were the dependency provider. So we did foster care adoptions and independent living. When this hit the first time, all of our supervisors who had previously been exempt were not making 40, whatever that salary was. So CHS had to make the decision as to whether to bump them up to the exempt salary or leave them where they were and make them overtime eligible. In the case of dependency, overtime is going to be worked because you got kids, shifts, all kind of foolishness. So it's a decision that they made, okay, we're gonna take all the supervisors and get them up to that exempt level so that we don't have to pay their overtime, understanding that we're going to have to pay overtime for our quote line staff. So if we have providers that end up in a situation like that, so you have the team member that's hit their hours, but kids are sitting there and they can't leave them. So those are conversations we will have to have with them to see how many of them this applies to. But then just give me the contact there, because I just want to make sure from our standpoint administratively that we're good, because we had hired our team members and they were all exempt. So we just work until the job gets done. And I just want to make sure that we can't come back and get sued. Get deemed for it by the federal government if it turns out we have to make some difference. So that's all that.
we would only be liable for the Children's Services Council.
Right, not them,
Right.
exactly, right. You're not
And
liable.
we can also basically say, regardless of whether or not they qualify for overtime, when you're at 40 hours, you're done.
Okay,
I'm just saying, one, let's find out if all of our employees are exempt. I definitely remember your position. It was
yeah,
my advocacy that day back when we were still in the county chambers. But I think that it's probably safe to say that
I know.
we have professional staff that.
yeah. So I just want to
think we're good.
yeah, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Other than that,
Thank
I'll
you.
get you an answer.
thank you so much.
So one thing, I mean, there's more to your salary to be considered exempt. We have lots of employees that make well over $43,000. They're hourly employees. There's a lot more to it than just.
Yeah, you have to make the it's a
Well,
test,
Yeah,
and that it's
to
a,
be in a supervisory
right,
position. I
it's an
mean,
employment test.
right.
And so I
And
just
you-
want to
and
make
what you're
sure.
saying is you believe that all of our, Ms. Clay and all of our current employees are exempt. Is that what you're saying?
Right now, we are exempt because we were hired as exempt,
Okay.
because we were hired at that higher threshold. So none of us get overtime.
But it's the
But
providers
you, and you also don't have to turn in time sheets.
Yeah, we don't do time
hours,
sheets or
right.
anything like
Right.
that.
Work till the job gets.
Right, we work until the job gets
But the
done.
problem is with our providers, then they have hourly employees, I assume.
Right, some of them have hourly employees, but then again, so I'll use Jacinta as an example. So Jacinta will be moving into a PQA specialist. She doesn't supervise anybody in that role. In this role she did, but in that role she won't. If we don't get her to that level, then in her job, she could very easily work overtime. And to say stop within your hours, with all respect, sometimes it just doesn't work that way. And what we have found is we work well over 60 hours a week between weekends and on the computer and answer, I mean, literally to the point where I literally have to say, stop working. So I just want to make sure we're okay. That's, you know, my job is.
How did this come to your attention?
You know, we have our membership group, the Florida Alliance for Children's Councils and Trusts, and part of what Michelle does is keep her ear to the ground on everything that goes on. And so from an HR perspective, was brought to our attention. So all of the children's services councils are looking at it. The larger ones are more concerned from a provider standpoint because they've got millions of dollars out there and larger providers and larger cost of living. The other thing I had asked was if it was a scaled approach. So if you're in a place where cost of living is more, you know, that's one thing. But if you're in a place where it's not that much, would this apply? And I was told unequivocally it's federal, so it applies across the board. So more to come, but my biggest concern was trying to get somebody who could talk me through this from a perspective of DMS, because I knew that's how my position was the equivalent of that. And so that's why I wanted to go with that guidance.
Erin Rock, one of my partners, was the former secretary of DMS, and she's gonna
Awesome.
connect us with the.
Thank you.
the attorney.
Yeah, and so we'll move through that. So thank you for letting me have that quick.
Okay. I don't know how I jumped over it, but that was item number 6. I think it was that committee member comments.
So, I also appreciate Ms. Fritz being here. I don't know that she would ever be here and not encourage us to go to the rollback rate, quite honestly. However, having listened to my wife vent for 10 minutes about leaving Publix and walking out with an $80 bill and nothing in her basket, the pain is real. As much as I've tried to do to increase teacher salaries and bus driver salaries and parapro salaries, it's just been tough to offset the rate of inflation. And I'm like, y'all should be more thankful. Look what we've done to beginning teacher salaries have increased by 11 grand and minimum wage has gone from $9.30 to $15. And it's just swallowed up by the cost of living now. So
Right all the way around.
definitely here.
You know, this is a personal experience, but at the Florida State LSU game last September. Post game, it's late at night, heading back to the hotel, and I've got myself and my 3 sons in my car. Dad, we're really hungry. So I mean, Wendy's. Okay, I don't really, frequent Wendy's, but I go in, I go through the drive-through. We order, not Happy Meals, whatever, like, well, I don't know, the meals, right? Whatever it is, for four people, but there's nothing more. $40-something. I'm like, this is Wendy's.
Drink, sandwich and fries.
Yeah, $40-something. It wasn't even good. No offense to Wendy's, but it was late at night. Nonetheless, I was just like, $40-something. And it isn't Publix. It isn't just Wendy's. It isn't just your homeowner's insurance, your auto. It's everywhere. And so it's important that regardless of how, we vote, it's important that when we vote, we understand that, it's more than just a couple nickels in a jar when it's that last nickel that hits. It does affect people. I appreciate you saying. Commissioner, any final comments for you?
Great meeting, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Staff.
Well, it is 6:12 and hearing no additional comments, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion is second without objection. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.